for a condition that's been known about since ancient times, epilepsy is still considered in the modern day with a widespread discrimination based on myths and misconceptions. In past centuries, people with epilepsy having seizures and convulsions would be considered under the influence of the devil. Today, most people think that people with epilepsy have extreme muscular spasms triggered when they see flashing lights. In reality, epileptic seizures can range from a sudden blank look and a loss of awareness of the location and surroundings through confused behavior to the convulsive seizure. Epilepsy is a common but complicated neurological condition, but the general perception is that the seizures are a mild nuisance which are easily recoverable from. And with the exception of accidents, epilepsy is a non-fatal condition. Around half of all epilepsy deaths are sudden and unexpected. Most of these involve young adults in the prime of life.
Carolyn was born in 1975, November the 4th, 25 minutes before bonfire night. As a little one, my name for her was Tiger Lynn, because she was so full of life and vitality. I'm reminded of, she always liked to be in control from a very early age, and when she was, I don't know, about 7 I suppose, or perhaps younger, she'd, well, from a young age she had all her dolls and toys all lined up in her bedroom, and she had her blackboard and easel with the chalk, and of course all the toys were always naughty, so she always had to tell these children off because they were always misbehaving. These were the toys. And I'd go past the bedroom door and I'd hear her telling the children the toys off. I used to take her to ballet and tap and speech and drama, so she was being, we were trying to, I guess, use the potential that she had and the energy that she had. She was involved in all sorts of activities. In school she was in the rounders team, and she used to do gymnastics. She'd always loved music, and I think she'd been very influenced by my mum, who was, she saw her every day. My mum loved singing, so my mum was always singing to her as a baby. And then of course her dad was a singer. Her dad was a tenor. Carolyn had this background of music going on. And she had a lovely voice, and of course my mum had her performing on a regular basis. But she had the talent, and when she went to senior school, she sang with her friends and with the choir. We actually took her when she was 14 to her dad's singing teacher. And the singing teacher said that she had the potential to be a soprano. But Carolyn wanted to be a pop star, and she filled the house with pop music. We didn't have any idea that epilepsy was going to happen in Carolyn's life. There was no sort of build-up. She had the mock A-level exams when she was 17, and of course with all the excitement of and the stress of the exams, I think the night of the end of the exams she probably will have gone out with her friends, And anyway, the next morning she had to get up and go to work. And I heard this, she got up to get ready, and I heard this noise in the bedroom. And so I went in, and she was actually having a seizure. I don't think I'd ever seen one before. She was in a bedroom. She was actually having it behind the door, and I couldn't open the door. And I was able to get the doctor to come and see her. And so she came out of it, and he said, I'll refer her to the hospital. And we went to see the consultant. But he didn't help us at all. He was very dismissive, and I was very anxious. And I asked all sorts of questions, but I was dismissed as if I was just a worrying parent, and as if there was nothing to worry about. So that laid the foundation really for how we, our attitude towards the epilepsy thereafter, I think. I think Carolyn must have known a little bit about epilepsy, and whatever she knew, it was all very negative. And she didn't want to be identified with that condition. And so she rarely spoke about it, didn't want to speak about it, didn't tell her friends where she'd been that day, and didn't want anybody to know what had gone on. So there was this air of secrecy. It was hidden. We lived as if it might never happen again. And it was just, and for the first 10 years of her epilepsy, she only had a seizure about once a year. And very often I was there. And so consequently other people weren't involved or weren't brought into the secret. But anyway, she went through her university studies and got her degree, and did well, and just carried on as if it was just something that happened occasionally, and she would deal with it. So she, in one way, she was very mature about it, but she wasn't going to share her secret with anyone. And if anybody observed her in a seizure, she swore them to secrecy. She definitely felt that there was a stigma attached to it, and she didn't want to identify with the stigma that she perceived there was there for her. Now, if she'd have known people with epilepsy, she would have been the kindest friend, to somebody. So that's really sad. She just wanted to be like everyone else and to enjoy all the opportunities that were at her fingertips. So she went off to university, she got a degree, and then she started looking for a job, and she eventually got a job in London. And she made a new circle of friends very quickly, very close friends, and she got somewhere to live, but still kept her secret. All through her 20s, we realised that she needed to go on medication. We were aware that medication could prevent the seizures. So I went with her a few times to the doctors in London, and they did say to her, we'd like you to go on medication. And she responded, I don't want to go on medication. She didn't want to go on medication because, number one, she didn't want any side effects. Number two, she didn't want to be reminded every day that she had this condition. She was in denial. She kept her head in the sand, and she wanted everybody else to do the same. Don't mention it. Let's pretend it doesn't happen and it might go away. I mean, I was saying all the time, I'd like you to go on medication, but she was adamant. She was very strong-willed, and she was adamant, no, I'll deal with it. But I said to her, you've got to go on medication. You can't go travelling all over the world with possibly this happening to you. And good enough, she eventually got the prescription and got the tablets. We spoke frequently on the telephone. So I would frequently say, have you taken your tablets? And most of the time she'd say, later. I'll do it later. And so she wasn't taking them as prescribed. And I didn't realise how important it was to take the tablets. We didn't know from day one that we should take the condition seriously. And then when it came to them taking the medication, we didn't know that you should take it as prescribed. And in my ignorance, I was thinking, well, I won't fuss too much. And then the doorbell went late at night. It was late for me, 9 o'clock. And so I was banging on the door, and I wouldn't answer the door. And I went upstairs, looked out the window, and there were two men dressed in police outfits. Anyway, I came down and stood in the porch, and I asked them what they wanted, and they said they wanted to speak to me. Anyway, they told me that Carolyn had died and that I had to phone the house and speak to her friend, which I did, and she confirmed that Carolyn had died. So it seemed that it was definitely an epileptic seizure that had killed her, from the description from the friends. So she was perfectly healthy otherwise. I don't think I had really considered the possibility of Carolyn dying in an epileptic seizure, but it had never been discussed, and I'd never consciously heard or read anything to suggest that it was medically a fact that people died in an epileptic seizure. It is a great shock to think that so many people are dying. We know that if people are on the medication, that thousands of deaths can be prevented. When I went to Epilepsy Bereaved, which was set up 15 years ago by bereaved families who've lost loved ones, and that the charity had been doing a lot of work with the NHS and the government and the researchers in order to identify what was going on, in order to try and prevent avoidable deaths. Epilepsy Bereaved are working on all levels to try and improve awareness, support bereaved families, of course, but to highlight the seriousness of this condition. They want epilepsy to be on the government agenda as well as the National Health Service agenda. And considering it's such a small charity, it really is in the forefront of trying to prevent unnecessary deaths from SUDEP. It's only in recent years, because of the charity's work, that this term has been recognised and is put on death certificates now. The general public need to understand epilepsy and not be frightened of it. And we need to dispel the myths about epilepsy, because we've been carrying these myths about epilepsy down the ages, down the centuries. And so greater understanding of this neurological condition, this brain condition, everybody on all levels should be taking the condition seriously. People have been very good in supporting me in my desire to try and bring something positive out of Carolyn's death and turn our grief into something constructive. So of course our concern now is for the young people who have epilepsy, so that the people with epilepsy can get the support and care that they need. Don't hide it. Share it with your friends, because they care.
Through the work of Epilepsy Bereaved, there exists more awareness and knowledge about epilepsy and its associated dangers. Increasing the general awareness amongst people living with epilepsy of the risk factors and the ways to reduce them will help them manage the condition and could potentially reduce deaths from SUDEP. Epilepsy is a long-term condition, and the outlook for most people is positive, with good management and knowledge. We need to understand the condition and its symptoms, and finally remove the perceived stigmas of the past. It's not too late to try to prevent future unnecessary deaths from epilepsy. If you have epilepsy and are concerned about SUDEP, please contact a health professional. For further information, you can contact Epilepsy Bereaved at this website.